first question, just to set the stage, is this, or these two questions. What are the primary causes and drivers of the housing crisis? And what has been the impact of the pandemic on housing issues? Now I'll invite Kristyn Wong-Tam to start, followed by Cheryll and then Martine. Councillor Wong-Tam.
Thank you, and thank you, Joe. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you to our hosts for bringing us together for this critically important conversation. And I think it's important for us to start with answering this question. And of course, there are a myriad of reasons on why the housing crisis exists today. I'm thinking about the city of Toronto, but I recognize that it is a housing crisis that's gripped most urban centers, and increasingly we're seeing homelessness fall into areas that are also very rural. I think it's important for us to cite that the deregulation of housing and sector is one of the primary drivers. If we treat it as a commodity, if we treat it as a financial instrument where its sole purpose for some people is to extract profit, and not as a home, a place of safety and dignity, a place that people can raise a family, then we will see that outcome. So this is what we're largely seeing now as the real estate sector, and all those who work in the continuum of building housing. If the drive is to create the maximum profit, then we're going to see everybody flood into that field and try to extract those profits. So that's one thing, the deregulation of the real estate market and the financialization or commodification of real estate. The other component, which I think is critically important, is just structural inequalities in life. And oftentimes that comes down to the costs of living and the wages of people are making that is not keeping up with the cost of housing. So those two have to be measured in parallel, because I don't think they can be separated. And at the core of the housing crisis, as I see it, is that if we don't try to regulate this back into a place where we can actually, number one, drive housing as a human right, and insist that we build all policies and take everything that we do as one order of government with the three other orders of government, and I'm thinking municipally, then we're going to not be able to fix it. And no housing crisis can be fixed by one order of government. It's got to be all three of us working together in order for us to address this. And right now, as I see it, we have to be able to legislate the human housing as a human right to a point that if there are federal dollars and a national government or a subnational government has adopted housing as a right, a basic right, then they need to also legislate that any dollars coming from that order of government must be therefore adopted by the sub-government. So if the city of Toronto has adopted housing as a right, then that's a good thing. But we have to make sure that the national government forces that along every municipal line until the actual end of line is built with that framework in mind.
Thank you very much, Kristyn. Cheryll, over to you. Same question.
So I would say that the foundational issue that's led to the housing crisis has been the fact that, when it comes to planning our cities and planning our communities, affordable housing hasn't really been the priority that it has been, that it should be. And this has been since the beginning of planning for communities in this country. So I can give you a number of different examples. I can go back as far as in 1890s, when they were people who were known as vagrants and essentially homeless people. And instead of building housing for them, they would put them in worker houses and force them to do menial tasks just to have enough food to eat and get them off the street. It wasn't to house them, it was to get them off the street. Going into the 60s, you had the boom of the single detached house, right? And the boom of that was really about prioritizing housing wealthier families, oftentimes heteronormative, like straight couples as well, and that was a huge hurt to immigrants who at that time were just Eastern European or Southern European immigrants, who were at that time racialized and otherwise by British immigrants, and women as well, who were also unable to access affordable housing. And so these things are still wrapped up within the planning process, where when we go out to communities, we're not thinking about how are we going to house these marginalized members of the public, lower income members of the public, and how are we going to push the systems internally to push a bit harder, right? From my position as a planner who practices a human rights approach, I spend a lot of time working with communities, but then also working to push planners to go a little bit further than they otherwise would. And they don't go as far as they would, because there's not a culture that's built within planning to do so. So and the culture of that is really about asking tough questions that might be, you can consider as a little bit outside of your scope of what is in the planning, right? But it ends up producing the affordable housing.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. And Martine, your perspective on the primary causes and drivers of the housing crisis.
Yeah, well, Kristyn and Cheryl actually spoke to, I think, so many of the important points that I was going to mention, but I'll just go over them quickly here. First of all, we had like federal and provincial abandonment, basically, of social housing 25 years ago. And we've just seen the impacts of that stacking up year over year with the lack of supply that hasn't been built. Maybe, as we'll discuss today, expropriation will be one way we can get some of that supply back. We're also seeing, as Kristyn mentioned, we've seen the deregulation of tenant protections in the province of Ontario and deregulation of rent controls. So those changes have brought in new ways to raise rents above provincially set guidelines and on vacant units. And then in addition to these cuts and deregulation, there's been a shift, as Kristyn mentioned, towards financialization. And this is a shift that's been encouraged by government policy. So what do we mean by financialization? Well, it's happening both in the sphere of homeownership and in rental housing. With homeownership, we had a situation where, just as government policy was shifting away from building social housing, they started to put energy into securitizing mortgages and encouraging and ensuring risk-free profits for lenders, basically for banks. This was happening shortly after that. We had this like low interest rate environment for many years. It's just led to tons and tons of cheap debt for households, which has the effect of both indebting people, but also driving prices higher and higher. And we've just seen the effects of that. We've also seen the effects of financialization in the rental housing sector. So this is all about the rise of these financial investors who've been buying apartments as investment products and jacking up the rents as their business strategy. So those are factors that have been among the factors leading to the crisis in affordability that we're seeing today. And I want to speak also, Joe, to your second part of your question, which is what has been the impact of the pandemic on housing issues? I think a lot of people in our audience already know the answer to this, but what we've seen is that COVID-19 has just added a new layer of hardship over this existing crisis. It's really exposing the frailties in our housing system that have been created by years of government cuts and neglect, and then this financialization and private sector profiteering. So I'll speak specifically to how the pandemic is affecting rental housing. And this is the new crisis that we're seeing with evictions that are being issued against people who are experiencing financial hardship due to the pandemic. And even though there's this common language of how we're all in this together, anybody who's reading the papers knows that this economic hardship and also infections related to the virus are not affecting us equally. So we're seeing that women, immigrant women, people of color, low-income people, the elderly and disabled people are more likely to be affected by the virus and the economic hardship brought on by the virus. And so these are also the people who are going to be disproportionately hit with these evictions. And as Joe mentioned in the beginning, we're seeing these evictions are already starting. So I think all of this just underlines the need for rapid and aggressive strategies to rethink our housing system. And I think that the expropriation ideas put out in Grayson's report by the FMTA are a really exciting way to start talking about this.